Okay, I'm going to call the third meeting of the 14th Undergraduate Senate to order. I will begin by calling roll. Senator Jackson.
Present.
Senator Flores.
Present.
Senator Rodriguez.
Present.
Senator Messias. Senator Hayashi. Senator Robbins. Max Robbins.
Here.
Senator Newlander. Senator Jenkins. Senator Jacobs. What's your last name? Thank you. Senator Ossip. Senator Adams. Senator Abisakara. Senator Pacheco, right? What is it? Oh, not here. Got it. Senator Perez. Senator Sellinger. Senator Kenna. Senator Zitzman. Senator Menashe. Senator Giesler. Senator Butler. Senator Luthra. Senator Jacob Robbins.
Present.
14, 15, yeah. Quorum is met. We're good. We will move to the adoption of the agenda. Is there any discussion on the current agenda? Seeing none, it will be adopted without objection. Moving to adoption of the minutes. Minutes are still being produced because we are also still in need of a clerk. So those will be hopefully done next meeting. Moving to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to reports from officers. First to Case Director Hawk. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Saran, for those that don't know me. I'm the case director. So let's just get right into it. I tried to make a short PowerPoint this time. So I'll just go over, do an overview of what case is and what we do and sort of how we collaborate with the Senate. So we're the Center for Advocacy and Student Equity. We're in President Fernandez's cabinet. And basically, we do two main things. One is we help students through various adjudication processes. So if a student's charged with a conduct violation, like having alcohol in their dorm, for example, we help them through that process, try to defend them as best as possible to get them a favorable outcome and to ensure that they're afforded their rights throughout that process. We have expanded though to a lot more departments. So it's not just conduct. We also deal with academic affairs. So when students are charged with plagiarism, for example, also financial aid appeals, issues that are unique to veterans and ROTC students, and also Title IX complaints. So we do a ton of different things. And the other major thing we do is policy reform. So we try to advocate for policy changes to the university to make it more equitable for all the students. And so that kind of also goes over what services we offer. And then in terms of how we work with the Senate, I try to report to the Senate as much as possible. I wasn't here last week because I know you all were having committee elections and those meetings usually run long, but from here on out, I'll probably report as frequently as possible. And in other ways that we work with the Senate, usually it's really just if you have any ideas on advocacy that would pertain to any of our issue areas, then feel free to reach out and we can help with that, because there are also a lot of times when senators want to do policy reform that we, for example, have been working on for a long time, or that we have background knowledge on that could be helpful. So yeah, it's really it's a two-way mutual stream, and just reach out whenever you think that we could be helpful. And so some updates. So we've been working on a ton of things, and so I'll try to keep it brief, but the first thing is student rights cards. So for those of you that are new and don't know about those, this is something that's been sort of in the student government conversation for several years. It's basically to, I'm sure you're all familiar with like the Oasis cards that are in bathroom stalls. It's essentially like putting those in strategic places around the university, like, residence halls that are already in the MDC elevators, that basically inform students on, the rights they have through the conduct process, for example. So a lot of senators have been asking me about updates on this because these were supposed to be put up last semester, but they weren't, like they're not up fully yet. And so I had a phone call just this morning, actually, and finally got an update on that from the Office of Campus Life. And they told me basically that they're not up yet because we need to get, like, you basically have to go through the bureaucratic hurdle that allows us to put them up in residence halls, because there's a specific protocol that we need to follow, which they're not even sure what that is yet. And also, like, putting them up in elevators in academic buildings requires a separate protocol. So they're going to be looking into that, and I'll be looking into that to get that process going. The other major issue as to why they're not up yet is because they're afraid that some of the information might be, like, outdated, or not outdated, but like no longer accurate. So yeah, I mean, those things need to be figured out. And actually, for the new senators, the student rights card is I think this is like a good case like study of like how, you may want to advocate for stuff that's really ambitious, but it takes a lot longer than you imagine, and there are a lot of processes and bureaucratic hurdles in place that can get in the way. Because again, like, this has been something that Case like thought we had finished and wrapped up at the end of last semester, but obviously that's not the case. So yeah. Now the academic integrity code. So as I mentioned, we also deal with academic affairs. You all may have noticed an email was sent out to every student with a survey about the academic integrity code to get feedback on what students know and how they feel about the survey, or about the code and how equitable it is. So that's something that we're using for the AIC task force, which was put together by Dr. Thomas in the College of Arts and Sciences. She's one of the AIC administrators. And it's basically a group of faculty and some students like myself who are trying to reform the code. They're doing like a complete overhaul, so it's like really critical to get student opinion because never before in recent history have they like totally rewritten the code. And so yeah, that survey, we've already gotten like close to 200 responses, so that's really good. We're also thinking of doing a potential town hall, which I still need to work out the logistics on. That's definitely going to be like, if we do it, it's going to be next semester once we have like some policy proposals on the table. So just keep an eye out for that. And then they also want Case to start looking into policies that other universities have with respect to academic integrity. So we're going to try to put together some sort of report there for the task force so that they can be better informed throughout this process. Okay, now with the conduct code, there are a lot of things we're working on specific to the conduct code, but a lot of that's happening like in conjunction with the Office of Campus Life and with other members of the President's Cabinet. But some general things that we're trying to do right now is sort of put together an annotated version of the code that would be released online for students to, like, number one, better understand the policies, because a lot of things in the code are very ambiguous and they're like long-winded and like students don't want to read it and they don't really understand it. So we're trying to put that together. That would also just have like hopefully some element to it that would explain, like, if you're found you're responsible for certain violations, depending on what your class standing is and what your if this is a first or second time violation, what the probable sanction would be, because the university doesn't give out that information, but I think they should. So we're trying to just like increase accessibility to the conduct code, make sure everyone like knows what's expected of them and knows what's likely to happen if they're found in violation. Okay, another thing is this sort of Case also helps with disability grievances. So when students think, I just covered a broad range of topics, like, but basically when students think that like they've either been denied a reasonable accommodation for a disability or they seek to like get an accommodation, they don't know how to do that. We help with those processes as well. And so one of the things I've heard from some students this semester is that they've been like hesitant to go to the university to talk about or to seek accommodations and to appeal in situations when they don't get accommodations, because like the processes are very like bureaucratic and can be sort of scary at times, to put it blandly. So that's something that I want to explore a little bit more, looking at the 504 policy and sort of the internal mechanisms there, to see if there's any way we could make it a little easier for students to file appeals and grievances. Okay, so I also mentioned we have a Title IX department, and we've been handling Title IX cases this semester, obviously, but SOG, which is the Sexual Assault Working Group, the Dr. Calandrio, and the Wellness Center is sort of like looking at how to reorganize SOG to like make it more efficient. So once that gets up and running, most of the Title IX like discussion is going to be centered there, I think, because that's like more than just case. It's like case and other members of student government and other community stakeholders that have a stake in those issues. So I'll keep giving updates on that as that moves along. Okay. Now for the financial aid department, one of the things we've been trying to do, like aside from helping students with appeals, is like inform students of their financial aid expectations. And that's mainly like, filing deadlines, because in conversations that I've had with the financial aid office, both this year and last year, one of the recurring themes is that students like just don't fill out their paperwork. And then that's like a major reason why a lot of students don't get as much financial aid as they may want or may need. So that's something that I'm working with the academic excellence director, Tia Jackson, who's in the president's cabinet, because she is more looped in on the financial aid discussions, and she's trying to get like a potential sort of like town hall or some sort of forum or some sort of event where we could better inform students of those expectations. So we're going to try and collaborate on that. And then another member of the president's cabinet, Raphael, is not here today, but he's the director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've been working together to sort of fix the issue regarding AUPD. The perception that students have of it as being scary and potentially discriminatory. So like we've had conversations with members of AUPD. And so we're going to try to do some sort of social media campaign. We're still working at the, coordinating that. And then potentially AUPD had mentioned that they might want to do some sort of like open house for students just to make them more accessible and so students know like who's in the force, how do they operate, and to just show that they're friendly and not just like scary police officers. And then in the veterans and ROTC department, one of my staffers in case met with the head of the liaison network for veterans at AU, and so they're going to brief me on like they discuss like various ways that CASE could help in that area, because that's something that we haven't done in the past, but we would like to help, because obviously those are students that also matter. And so they're going to brief me on that, and we're going to look at ways we can expand there. Then finally, one thing that came up sort of like during the AUP conversation was this idea of a student emergency medical transport service, which is like very preliminary. I think like other universities have it. I believe GW has it, if I remember correctly. And that, like, again, it's like very preliminary. I'm just going to look into like different universities and their policies regarding that. And that's not like a case exclusive thing. It's like stuff we're working on in the president's cabinet, but I just thought it was important for you all to know. And yeah, I mean, those are all the updates. Like I said, I tried to keep it short. I'm still recovering from food poisoning, so it's not super easy for me to be here. But yeah, if you have any questions, I'll take them.
Questions for the director, Tom.
Thanks, Ron. First, congratulations on being a productive semester. You're doing a great job. My question for you is, could you elaborate on what you're discussing with the student rights parts potentially being outdated, especially after all the time and controversy was surrounding the environment?
So they didn't go into detail, like, so they're gonna send me a digital version of the actual card, and they want me to review it to make sure it's accurate. But yeah, they didn't go into details during the phone call. They just said that, like, they just want to make sure that everything's accurate and up to date. And I think part of that is because, like, there were some minor changes made to the conduct code this year. So it's a little different from last year. So maybe that could have affected what type of language we should use on the cards. Overall, I don't expect, like, I'm not expecting there to be a discrepancy, but there is a potential for that, and that's one of the reasons why they've been hesitant to put it up. So they're going to send that to me, and I'll look it over. But even if there was no discrepancy, there's still the other issue of, like, getting approval from all of the building managers to put them up in the various elevators.
Bobby?
So on the annotated conduct code, I think that's a great idea. But I can foresee, the university administrators having some, problem with it because that's a recurring theme. So, are you at, like, I understand it's in the preliminary stages, but, has anyone had a conversation about that yet?
Yeah, so last time I met with Katie, like we went over a ton of things, and this was one of them. She thought it was a good idea. Obviously, I'm not gonna like release this without, like showing other people first to make sure that there's nothing erroneous in it. But yeah, like I don't think there will be too much pushback because they seem like relatively receptive to the idea. And it's also like I think it's something that can be done quickly. I mean, I've read the conduct code way too many times, and so I already have like a personally annotated version. Obviously, that wouldn't be the same as the version we put out, but like I have a general idea of the areas where students should have those summarized and like more expeditious explanation on things.
Bobby?
Do you know off the top of your head, that's fine if not obviously, but how the volume of cases that cases taken this year compares with the previous semesters?
Yes, I do actually know. So we've taken around 50 this semester, and so I don't have. I believe I remember from what Will told me, like last academic year, we've taken like 40 to 70 in total. So like we're definitely on track to beat that number, that 70 total, if that was the upper threshold. But yeah, we've definitely seen a lot more cases and more advocates in case. I think part of the reason is because like more advocates in case are now active. Like a lot of the junior level people are actually taking cases and going to hearings and conferences. So yeah, I mean, like we've definitely, I think we're like on a upward trend in terms of how many cases.
Tom?
To go back to the students' rates, cards, my two questions about it are just for clarification. Those are printed and in the possession of student activities or student government, right? And then my second question is, obviously there's the bureaucratic procedure regarding getting it posted. Do you have a approximate timeline for when they'll be up?
Okay, yeah, so the first question, yeah, I don't have the cards personally, but I'm sure, I think that the office Campus Life does. They definitely have the digital version, as I mentioned. So yeah, that's the first question. And to your second question, they said that they would send out an email and CC me on that this week to the building managers and all the people who we would need to have conversations with before we put this up. My guess is that either we would start that process of putting them up by the end of this semester or at the beginning of next semester, just depending on like how long it takes for these people to like respond to emails and how many actual steps we need to take in terms of getting approval.
Jacob?
Thanks for being here, Sarem. I really liked the PowerPoint today. For those of you
Yeah,
who don't
thanks,
know,
Ethan.
Sarem is really trying to do cool new things with PowerPoint. It looks fantastic today. The question I have is just really simple. I know that something you've been talking a lot about is training and revamping the training and making sure the advocates that you have on are properly trained. It sounds like that went really well. I just wanted to have an update on that. And
Yeah,
you
so
kind of implemented something for like the longer term also for training.
yeah, so they've all been trained for a long time now. So they're all trained in their respective departments. Some of them have like crossed over to other departments as well as needed. As I mentioned, Bobby, we've had like around 50 cases. So like sometimes we need people to switch over because just to accommodate that. And as for like long term, I think that I can probably write some sort of like SOP or something on like when training should occur, for a case in the future. But I think it really just comes down to like reaching out to the administrators and saying like, hey, can you like come down and talk to us about this topic? Because really like Title IX is the only place where they have like official like training. The other departments don't ever do like actual training, but it's like historically they've never even like come and like spoken to case advocates before. So this year I was like, hey, like come over, have a meeting with us, explain the processes, explain what you think case's role is in those adjudicative mechanisms. And so, yeah, I mean, like I can certainly write something up and, make that more, or even that's something the Senate could do, right? I mean, you could mandate that case every year as training by a certain date or by, a certain amount of weeks into the semester. So.
Other questions for?
People be visible this summer, we require them to be here for training. Just
Other questions for the director? Cool, thank you. Okay, moving to KPU Director Hanuna. Okay, I was right. Got it.
Do you have an outlet back there? By you?
Yeah.
You.
Oh wait, yeah, your presentation's down far in my email. Give me a second.
I'm gonna apologize in advance. My presentation is really long. But you know, this is my first time presenting to you, so I thought I would go all out.
Are we gonna find out about one year?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even know about Wonka. Although I do have a meeting about that tomorrow.
Oh my god, yes. What the hell?
Yeah, it's like 18 slides.
Oh my god.
I will go through it literally as quickly as possible. Okay. I'm also, during this, going to be passing out this 33-page long training document that we give to all of our staff for our staff training. Please return this to me at the end. I didn't make a lot of copies because it's 33 pages, but it's just to give you a better sense of like KPU and how it operates and what we are as a team. Yeah, keep this between all of us. Thank you.
Is the
No. You'll see why when you read it. Okay.
Floor is yours.
The floor is mine. Thank you. How's it going, everybody? So yeah, I'm here to talk to you a little bit about KPU. Sure, we could go to the next slide. There's like I have all the transitions and everything, so
Oh god.
we're gonna make this quite a time. So like, what is KPU, right? Like, it's pretty much on the most basic level one of the programming branches within the student government vice president's cabinet. Essentially, we're the student-run, student-funded, nonpartisan lecture group on campus. So we bring all like the cool speakers that like you see around. We're celebrating 50 years as an organization this year, which is really cool. And then every year we have 3 staple events essentially: Capitol Steps, All-American Weekend, and then Wonk of the Year. We've gone through 3 of those so far, which means there's only Wonk left. But yeah, that's essentially kind of like who we are. And the rest of the year is really for us to have as much creative freedom over what type of speakers we want to bring. And we have a lot of leeway there. All right, so this is me, just to give you like a really basic introduction. You know I'm extra as like, you know. So I'm going to give you this full presentation. My name is Yazan. You can feel free to call me Yaz. That's what most people refer to me as, including Sylvia Burwell, which is another thing. I'm a junior. I study political science, and I have minors in SIS and IT. That's 3 different schools. I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, which is why I'm not going home for Thanksgiving. This is my 3rd year on KPU, so I have a lot of experience. But additionally to that, I am pretty involved in other places on campus. Like I teach AUX, I work in SPA, I was the AU Dems president, I was in Greek life. And then just like some personal things about me in case you want to be my friend. I really like politics, video games, and memes. All 3 of you are like, all 3 are open to friendship. Really sense the theme I'm going for here today. Okay, so just to talk to you a little bit about like the KPU staff structure, what we are like as a team. I understand there's often been kind of like this cloud over KPU, or at least that's what the perception has been, right? Of like, how do you operate? What do you do? How do you get to the decisions you make? I'm here to clarify that a little bit today as I get into the more serious portion of the presentation now. This is the staff structure. Trevor, do you mind clicking through it a little bit, please? Thank you. We have 20 amazing individuals on our team. Almost all of them are unpaid. There's 1 director, 4 deputy directors on our leadership team, plus our financial coordinator, who's actually here today. If you want to raise your hand, Jordan, and he can always be a resource for you when it comes to anything finances. And then we have 10 full team members and then 4 first-year fellows. The first-year fellowship program is an opportunity for us to develop leadership and skills as it relates to KPU from very early on in students' experiences at AU, and help like them with their time at AU and to support the organization. That's how I got involved with it. So it's something that's really important to me. This is a picture of all of our staff. And now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about like how things are going with KPU so far. So we're projecting around 10 events this entire semester. Some of our two like staple events were of course like the Parkland Students event, which you see in the top left and bottom pictures, and then the All-American Weekend Loretta Lynch event, which is in the top right. These were very popular and heavily attended events that were some of the biggest things we've done this semester. And as you can see from the bottom picture, we're really great at like engaging the student body. We put on 10 events this semester. That includes events that we co-sponsor, which has been a really important goal of mine personally, is that like we're not just putting on these events for ourselves, but working with other organizations, partners, schools on campus to do all of this together. Perfect, thank you. So talk a little bit about like how KPU and the Senate can interact a little bit. So obviously the Vice President-elect of Student Government will nominate the KPU director. The Senate provides advice and consent on the nominee. The Senate votes to confirm or deny that nominee. And you, of course, allocate our budget every year, which I greatly appreciate. I, of course, will do my best to report to you regularly as the KPU director. And, of course, you can step in when things go wrong, such as when like KPU is not putting on events. Trevor, can you click through, please? Thank you. We're misusing money. There's like shit's going down, essentially. Spoiler alert, that doesn't usually happen. Like usually you guys do a pretty good job of like providing that advice and consent in the nominee and like are really good at vetting like is this a good person to be director. But of course things happen and there have been years where like shit has just hit the fan essentially, both in KPU and to the other programming branches as well. So it's nice that Senate is there as kind of like a structural support to make sure that that stuff does not happen. And of course, any of the returning senators may tell you I'm a pretty friendly face. I always stop by the office and will always try my best to like get to know you on individual basis. So please like don't view me as like an enemy or like, oh, like whatever, like let's be friends. And also there are some cool things that you could all be doing in terms of advocacy that would really support KPU and some of the other organizations on campus. So if you're interested in that, please let me know, because you could actually be very helpful to the work that we're doing. So let's talk a little bit about the numbers game here as it relates to KPU. I'm a big fan of data. I collect as much data as possible, and I really try to drive a lot of the decisions. I had good conversations about this while they smile at me. I try to drive a lot of the decisions that we make with KPU by the numbers that we're collecting on the students. So let's look at this first statistic here. We've served 3,578 students exactly up until this point to the semester. About last year, we were at 3,550 for the fall semester, so we're right on track of where we should be. The next thing, we've partnered with over 10 different student organizations to make sure that like we are representing as many constituencies at AU as possible, and getting a sense of like what these student organizations want from KPU and how we can be a supportive organization to them, so that we're not just using the resources that we have to ourselves and the work that we want to be doing, but supporting those other student organizations as well. Of the different schools like SPA, SIS, blah, 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 we have partnered with 5 out of the 7 of the different schools. The 2 that are missing are SIS and KOGOD, and I have had conversations with them very proactively about how we can continue to work together. To talk a little bit about like why that's necessary, that kind of goes into the marketing side of like, one, we're trying to reach as many students as possible, and like talking to these different schools and getting them to co-sponsor when it represents kind of like the mission of those schools as well is very helpful. Also, on the other hand, schools have money, and we are always trying our best to absolutely maximize the budget that we have as an organization, right? So like we have $203,000, but like we actually spend a lot more than $203,000, and that's because I am actively fundraising at pretty much every single point of the year. But yeah. And then going into a little bit about like the KPU team and what we look like, we accept about 38% of applicants when it comes to the regular team, and then a 6% acceptance rate for our first year fellows program. I don't say this to be like, oh, like look at how cool and exclusive KPU is, right? I like really kind of want to talk about the implications that this has to the organization. One, it's incredibly encouraging that like people want to be so involved with KPU, want to be so involved with student government, and that like we have a lot of interest out there. Like for example, for like first year students, like there were almost 70 applicants and we only could take 4 people because of the like capacity of our staff. And like year over year, we've grown the number of people that could be on our staff, but that's still been kind of difficult because you can only hit a certain point, right? Wait, one more thing back there. One thing about like why this is a challenge is like, how do you continue to engage students who want to be a part of the organization and want to be a part of the work that we're doing? In a way that is as inclusive as possible and trying to include as many students as possible, right? We've been thinking a lot about this internally about like, what can we do to get people outside of KPU involved with the work we're doing besides just showing up and attending, you know? We've done a few things this semester, like we've had volunteers at some of our events, which is something we have absolutely like hated doing in the past. And that has worked out really well. We're also taking some other initiatives that I'll talk about later in my presentation. Let's talk a little bit about like KPU as an organization, its relationships. On the university level, we work with the following people: the Office of Student Activities, which ensures that we are doing things correctly and is overseeing every single purchase that we make. Excuse me. Dr. Fonta Ah in the Office of Campus Life. I work very closely and directly with Dr. Ah, and making sure that like the work that I'm doing is lining up with the work that the university is doing. Like a big part of that is like the Inclusive Excellence Plan, how we can be a part of that. And I've had conversations with her about that. And she's very directly involved with some of like the execution of our events and involving those high level university officials. The University Communications and Marketing team. So Vice President Terry Flannery of like AU University Communications and Marketing. We work very closely, especially when it comes to Wonk of the Year and how we market the events that we're hosting to students, prospective students, and being part of the AU brand. And that's a really important part of the job that we do. The Office of the President. So we work very closely with Leslie Wong, Jonathan Sorge, who was previously in the office, to communicate both directly to President Burwell and to make sure that, again, we are helping and representing the needs of the President's office as well. With that being said, I also work kind of indirectly to President Burwell. If you've been to our events, you know, like, for example, at the Parkland event, All-American Weekend, like she was there giving the introduction and as part of that formal process of like what KPU is as well. The deans of all the schools, I have like, I'm on like a first name basis with pretty much most of them and work very closely with them, and then various others. Off campus, our most important partners are like the Hill newspaper. If you've been to some of the Hill events that we've been to, they're a great partner to have as we continue to reach that goal of like engaging AU students to the DC community outside of just AU and what like the whole like laboratory of the classroom is. And then a dozen agents and companies. So like we work with production people to make sure like we're contracting off-site to get all our production stuff done at vendor events. We work with agents that represent all of the speakers that we bring. And I tell you all this because like KPU has a certain stigma of being super secretive and being super like over serious about like their events and the work that we're doing. And like people are always like, why? Like, why are you so serious? Like, why? Like, kind of this, some people call it a facade. I mean, like, this is really why, right? Like, when I am working with like these people on like the highest levels of the university administration, like, I really have to have my shit together, you know? And it's really important that like we are giving KPU and thus AUSG the best image possible by being on our highest level of professionalism when it comes to the execution and planning of these events, and that we keep everything wrapped underneath a very tight wrap. That's it there. So let's talk to the money a little bit here. So first off, we have a $203,000 budget for the year. So thank you so much for allocating that this year. Historically, we have served the most students of any student organization on this campus, and that continues to be the case today, which is why our budget is always the largest. A lot of people ask me why our budget is confidential. Trevor, you click the next one, please. And like why we're really secretive and, again, putting this kind of cloud over the work that we're doing. This is for a few reasons. One is like the most obvious is that like we don't want to ruin like the surprise of like what we're planning. You know, like a big part of it is like we launch this event and then people are like, oh my God, I'm so excited. And it's like, if they had known about that for months, like the buildup isn't there. But the more important part is that like, sure, like everyone in the student government signs these NDAs where it's like they can't like disclose any of the information that they get within AUSG. But what's important to realize is that like I also sign, not like sign, but like I have agreements with all the agents that I work with, all the third-party contractors that I work with that this information is confidential. So that information remains confidential between me and the agent. It does not go to any other person besides me, the agent, student activities, and then Jordan, who's our financial coordinator. Other than that, like there are often times where even members of my own team do not see the contract of which like we work with speakers on. If I can't even share it with my own team, I can't share it outward. That's like how important this is. Because at the end of the day, the legal liability falls on me directly, and it's really important that I keep like covering my back and making sure that like I'm following the guidelines of my agents. With that being said, I'm more than happy to answer any questions about the budget that you may have. We're anticipating about $100,000 left at the end of this semester. As we go into like per student spending, we are averaging at about $30.05 per student at this point in the semester. This is in comparison to $57.71 at this point last year. The reason that number is so much higher is because they had done Wonk of the Year in the fall, and Wonk of the Year is historically the most expensive event that we hold. I expect my number to rise towards the end of next semester. My goal is always to be at or below the student activities fee. And it's really important when I'm putting on events that I am not overspending. And part of my job is to make sure I'm calculating that like the speakers we're going to bring are interesting to the point where it's like we get enough students to show up. And that's a big part of it as well. And then I've talked to some of you about this, but like given some calls for student government transparency, we're going to be putting out a public budget transparency report this December that Jordan and I are working on right now. Let's talk a little bit like about our budgeting as well. So like historically, the most expensive portion of like the work that we're doing is when we're putting on these big vendor events, right? And there are many ways to do them in a way that like budgets it appropriately. Just to kind of like talk you through that a little bit. Like in 2016 to 2017, we had a one full vendor setup, which is like when you have all the chairs on the ground and it's everything. And then like two small vendor setups when it's just like the back bleachers. Last year, we had 2 full vendor setups and 0 small vendor setups. This year, we're prospecting 3 full vendor setups and 0 small vendor setups. So the Parkland student is 1, All American Weekend was the other, Wonk of the Year will be the 3rd. How are we doing this? Just talking a little bit. We moved Wonk back to the spring, so we don't have our highest cost event at the beginning. That was for 2 reasons. 1, because it's our 50th anniversary. And 2, just to create some separation between All American Weekend and Wonk of the Year so that they're not as closely together. And we can ensure one big event in the spring semester. The Parkland event that we had was an absolutely great value. It was one of the cheapest vendor events we ever put on. And it was the most well-attended vendor event that was most well-attended KPU event that was not Wonk of the Year in the past 4 years. So that was really good in terms of like getting us to the numbers right now. All American Weekend also, like we paid about half the cost as we had been for 2 previous years. And we have a big focus on sponsorships and smaller events as well. This is kind of a breakdown of like how we're spending all of our money, right? As you see here, 73%, the very large majority of like our budget is going directly to paying the speaking fees of the speakers that come and speak at AU. 14% is production costs. So if you see all the fancy stages and vendor and like the big lights and everything like that all cost money. 8% is venue space. As unfortunate as it is, as a student organization on this campus, you have to pay to use many of the most prominent spaces on campus. I pay thousands of dollars to book vendor every time. I have to pay for Constitution Hall. I have to pay for Foreman Theater. We had an event there back in October as well. So we have to unfortunately associate those costs as well. 4% comes to other things. That goes from everything to like internal, like, oh, we need pens in our office, to the catering in our events that we host at our receptions. And the posters we print out that like all the speakers sign and everything. It's like a cool momentum thing. And 1% is going to co-sponsors elsewhere. Although that's kind of not entirely accurate. It should be a little bit more than 1%, but like we don't count it that way for a specific reason because like it counts for speaking fees. This is kind of like an overview of like our budget, right? Like with every single thing that we're doing, we're calculating like this is how much we started off with. This is what our current balance is. This is like what all of our expenses are for KPU. How much revenue are we making to kind of offset those costs? And then what are we actually paying? Then we also calculate the total number of attendees that are attending all our events and the price per student. And then breaking it down of like costs of like, oh, like this is how much once we add all these new events in, is going towards speaking fees, production fees, venue fees, partnerships, etc. And then this is a slide that just shows you kind of like how we break down our speakers. I have the rest of them blacked out except for capital steps, but you can see here, like per event, we're calculating like how many students are attending and then how much we're spending per student on every single one of our events. And that's a really important metric for us to help gauge where we are at budget-wise. Okay, and then kind of like for a spring budget, this is kind of how we're taking that $100,000 that we have left and spreading it out through the semester. Trevor, you just want to click through all of it. It's cool. That's cool. January, we have a little fun event coming up for you. I'm going to keep it a surprise for now, but like stay tuned. February, we're allocating most of our money towards Black History Month and Founders Week events. And then March is going to be for Women's History Month. We really cede a lot of the creative freedom to WI over that, and we partner to try to make sure that like our interests are aligning. April is the big daddy of all things, and that's Wonk of the Year. Again, historically, Wonk has been the most expensive event that KPU puts on every single year. And so that's why there's so much money allocated towards it. But yeah, and then all semester, we're also doing this huge push for congressional outreach now that the elections are over. So we're sending like hundreds of invitations to members of Congress, government officials, et cetera, et cetera. The thing about them is that they're all free. You can't charge them, or like you can't pay them to come speak because, you know, like ethics rules or something like that. It could be bad. And then let's talk a little bit about like how we choose all the speakers that we do. We consider a lot of factors when it comes to our decision-making process. From everything to like feasibility, which I'm always the one worrying about, because like, how much money do we have, blah, 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 to like what insight is this speaker going to bring to our student body? Like, how are we being representative of the student body and the issues that like AU students care about? Do we think that like there is going to be a certain insight that these students receive from attending our events versus not attending our events? Like, what is the potential for controversy there? If I'm like worried that this campus is going to blow up, I'm not going to bring someone. But controversial events in nature, I don't think are necessarily a bad thing. It really depends on like why they're controversial and what value they bring to the student body. And how we're working with student organizations, feasibility, optics, blah, blah, blah. We decide our speakers as, some more points. We decide our speakers as a team. I will never like bring a speaker that I do not have the full backing of my team to bring. That would be incredibly irresponsible because we do make all these decisions together, and it's really important that like my team is serving as representatives of like the students at AU, and they bring that feedback to me. A lot of them are really involved with student organizations, are great people. And so I take like their feedback and criticisms of potential speakers really seriously and very thoughtfully. The university also has a major stake in our work as well. So like as an institution, KPU is really ingrained into AU, which is why they're really supportive of the work we're doing and why like KPU has access to all these high-level university officials in the way that other student organizations don't. We really care about like the quality of our events. So I'm not trying to put on like 20 million events to say like I put on more events than any other KPU director like ever. I'm more in the mindset of like, are the students attending our events going to get something good out of this? Are they going to enjoy the conversation? Are they going to learn something? Is that eventually going to facilitate conversations elsewhere on campus or lounges and classrooms, et cetera, et cetera? What academic, scholarly, and social value are they getting out of attending this event? Not how many events can I have and how many students can I fit in a room, right? If I end up an event that's really good and only 20 people show up, and as long as it wasn't costing like $200 per student, and it was like a really good event, like I don't care that only 20 students showed up. I care that the 20 students who were there enjoyed their time at the event and learned something from it. And that's something I really like to stress all the time. Going back to that whole thing of like how we engage outside students with the work that KPU is doing, something else that we're coming out with later this semester is a student suggestion box, which is literally just a Google form that we're going to be communicating to the student body about and having them the opportunity to give us suggestions for speakers and stuff like that. And yeah, so one big pitch to you as well as like the big happy giant that I am. Like I said, I try my best to be a friendly face. If you ever like want to get lunch, coffee, or whatever, or like hang out, or like have any questions about like KPU or student government, I'm more than happy to like answer those questions. And yeah, that's all I've got for you. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be more than happy to answer those as well.
Questions for the director, Tom?
Oh, sorry. Well, first, thanks for this thorough rundown of your organization.
Thank you.
I have 2 questions for you.
Mhm.
The first, you spoke about this like personally a little bit. Could you elaborate on the relationship between the political union and the Science Institute of Politics? And my second question for you is there any additional programming going to be happening for the 50th anniversary?
Yeah. So to answer the first question, it's awkward because I think one thing that is not really seen up front is that the Science Institute is really still trying to get a footing of like what it wants to be and what its goal at this university is and what role that plays into the greater university mission. In terms of like the relationship to KPU and the Science Institute, that's still kind of developing. There have been opportunities where we were like this close to like coming together on stuff and like working on it, and then that fell through or whatnot. And we have talked about like how their mission lines up with our mission, but there is no really like kind of like direct connection there. If you look at like some of the other schools that have like political institutes similar to the Science Institute, their lecture series are actually housed within those political institutes themselves. And it's awkward because like KPU is not, which is not a bad thing in my opinion. But it's a matter of like, because it's so early into like the Science Institute's development and kind of finding its footing at AU, we don't know what that relationship is entirely going to look like. But we have been in conversation, and have been in situations where it's like we clearly want to work together and have similar interests. It's a matter of like how we do that correctly. I'll give you one example is like there was one person we were gonna bring that like fell through, that like we wanted the Science Institute to co-sponsor with us, and like they essentially made the decision that like it was too partisan of an event. And so that kind of goes back to the thing of like they're still deciding like what like threshold are they going to reach, you know? As it relates to the 50th anniversary, so let me talk you kind of like through that process as well. There was kind of like this expectation that like was put on us and we put on ourselves, including myself, that like we would have this big like KPU like 50th anniversary event. Obviously that didn't happen due to a myriad of like logistical reasons that just simply did not work out. And you and I have had very personal conversations about that, so you're well aware. And I made the decision real quick to like, instead of keep trying to put on this big event that has failed for like almost 3 semesters now, just like do other programming. And so that was like where the parking event came out of. So I really focused on that. So how I kind of build it in the end is that like, we're not going to have like this one big 50th anniversary event, but rather like focus this semester on like putting KPU back to its roots 50 years earlier. And that was about like KPU being a civil forum for people to engage in conversations with government and high level political officials, and specifically about the issues that like they care most about. So that's been really important to me this semester, is making sure that like it's not so much about like this is a 50th anniversary event, but like all of this stuff is deeply rooted in like what our mission is as an organization. I hope that kind of answers your question.
Bobby?
Last year, KPU was proud. They had this figure like for every dollar of student money we spend, we raise this many cents outside
Mm-hmm.
money, and it was almost 1-to-1. Do you know off the top of your head how KPU's like outside funding this year is stacking up in proportion to the budget?
Mm-hmm. It's a lot less than 1-to-1. And I'll give you the primary reason for that is our biggest source of outside funding historically has always been Wonk of the Year. That boosts our number up a lot. But there is a lot of fundraising going on. And I think at the end of the year, we'll be a lot closer, if not at that 1-to-1 ratio. Again, Wonk plays a big factor in that, if that answers your question.
Curtis?
Yes, thank you for speaking to the Senate, and I'd just like to touch on how your collaboration with SIS and CodeGod has been in the past and how it can go on in the future, because I did see last year that CodeGod did bring Damon John, who's on Shark Tank, and I'm thinking, how can KPU work with CodeGod? I'm not in CodeGod, I'm in SPA. How can you work with those 2 schools in particular, because they definitely are 2 of the major schools at
Yeah, so historically, for various reasons, SIS and KOGOD have been some of the schools that we've worked the least with. So for example, when I met with the dean of SIS, Dean Chin, we talked a little bit about how like there has been no formal relationship between KPU and SIS. And that's been for many reasons. One, like when it comes to SIS specifically, they really like to have control over their events, or they did previously. Now they're more so in the mindset of like, we want to support student organizations such as KPU, with some new leadership there in SIS. And so I've had those conversations and they've been really encouraging, and we've actually gone like forward with like the actual like planning steps of like different events. So it's really on the horizon there. It's just a matter of like when at this point. KOGOD is a bit more challenging as well, in the sense that like they're another one of the schools that really operates in the silo versus the other parts of like the campus community. Again, I've had conversations there. It's always a little bit more difficult than some of the other schools. One, because like inherently in our name, we are like a political organization, but we don't just limit ourselves to political speakers, right? And finding a way to kind of bridge that divide between KOGOD and political speakers is really important to us. It's just a matter of like finding a way to do it right. And again, I think it's like one of those situations where it's like not a matter of like if, but a matter of when. It's really all about developing that relationship because it's not been developed in the past. Yeah, Tom, I can't answer your question. That's your job.
Tom.
Go back to a previous point of conversation. We don't need to discuss in the open some of the behind the scenes stuff regarding the anniversary event, but if my recollection serves me correctly, when the previous director spoke to the Senate Finance Committee asking for an additional, I think it was like $13,000 to increase the KPU budget to over $200,000, which is a lot more than it was previously. It was under the promise
Only by
that because
6,000.
it was the 50th year of the organization, there would be some sort of large 50th anniversary event. And so I understand the argument that you're presenting that quality is more important than quantity, which is certainly true. But given that there was logistical problems with getting such an event earlier on in the semester, are there any plans moving forward to have a similar such event as the promise and justifying such a large budget?
Well, I would note that like one, the budget was only like a $6,000 difference in the end, which is like substantial, but like not like super substantial, you know? And I think we would have requested that budget either way. And to answer your question, like, yes, but I can't tell you how. Or I'm not, I like, am not yet, but like, yes.
So to clarify, you can't tell us what's in the works, but potentially a 50th anniversary.
Essentially, like what my goal is to like couple Wonk of the Year with the 50th anniversary event.
So it's like an extra big one.
Not exactly. Well, one, I don't know who Wonk of the Year is yet, but like that's like a matter of it. But like it's a matter of like it's more so in principle than it is of like we're gonna bring like a huge ass like speaker just for the point of it being like the 50th anniversary event, you know?
Okay.
But yeah.
Curtis.
Yes, we spoke earlier in the year, and thank you for just speaking. I literally knocked on Yaz's door, and he answered, and he talked to me about how we can bring a bipartisan set of speakers to this campus. I'm surprised nobody has touched upon the basis of in particular conservative speakers on this campus. I just like to make a disclosure. I'm apolitical as a senator for this campus at large, and what I've seen, I mean, now my title is chairman of campus and student life. And I've seen a lot of negative effects of the Young Americans for Freedom bringing in Mr. Dinesh D'Souza to speak on our campus. There's a lot of backlash, and I was wondering what is KPU stance on bringing conservative but reasonable speakers to American University.
Can I use this real quick?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Yes. Okay, I'm gonna frame this answer kind of in this lens right here of like high, medium, and low. I'm absolutely a huge proponent of like making sure that there are conservative speakers at AU and making sure that KPU is playing a role in that, as we already have this semester. And I am very much against the mindset of like, just because someone is a Republican that like we can't host them on this campus. It's really important that like we are exploring that diversity of thought in our speakers. With that being said, this has been quite a challenge for us as a team over the past couple of years. I'm going to be 100% transparent with you. You can ask like Jordan or like Maddie, who's also on my staff. There's consistent conversations within our team of like what the value to bringing certain speakers are, what is that threshold, and how do we decide like who is worth bringing, even if they're controversial, right? So this is essentially my stance on it. I'm a really big fan, again, of like making sure that we have that diversity of thought in there. With that being said, I want to do it for the right reasons and want to make sure that it's doing well. First off, when it comes to like the physical controversy, I like to categorize KPU events specifically in 3 different categories: high controversy, medium controversy, and low controversy. Low controversy would be someone like literally like 90% of the events we hold. Like Loretta Lynch was a low controversy event. Last year when we had Gabrielle Union, Malala, et cetera, low controversy events. Medium controversy events are ones that create more conversations about like, well, like, I don't like this speaker. Why are they coming, right? And what value do they bring to the university? The Parkland students was a really good example of this event. Like there were like, it was more controversial than like people think, you know, like given like the campus makeup. But it wasn't so controversial where it detracted from the overall goal of like bringing them to the campus. If anything, it was really a benefit in the way that like it facilitated that conversation on campus. And I would like literally read comments and posts of like, oh, like we should bring this, and like people arguing on Facebook, and that's like great. Like that's exactly what should be happening. That's why it's successful, right? High controversy events is where I shy away from. Scratch them out, right? And let me tell you a little bit why. Like Dinesh D'Souza is a really good example of this, right? It's a matter of like why they're controversial. You know, it's a matter of like, do I agree in like how they're doing things, or is it a matter of like our principles and values as an institution? If I am like bringing someone super controversial with Dinesh D'Souza, which I would never do, just to clarify, like there is no inherent value to the students attending that event. All it does is create so much of a riot and backlash that overshadows any value that the student body gets from attending those events, right? If I can anticipate that there will be people protesting out the door of Bender Arena over our walk of the year, I'm not going to bring that controversial of a walk of the year. Like one example of this was we brought like Dick Cheney, I think 5 years ago, as the very last conservative speaker to be in Bender. Since then, and that event was so heavily protested where like people would literally like lay down in front of his car to make sure that he wouldn't leave, and like people were sitting outside Bender Arena with protests, right? Like that takes away from, that takes away from the benefit of our event. And like the people in that room may enjoy that event, but so many people hate it, where it's like, I would be better served bringing speakers who are less controversial at that medium or low level than bringing them at the high level. I think it was a bad idea for YAF and y'all to bring the speakers that they have brought this year. And KPU will not engage in like that level. But I'm glad we're having the conversation about like what like controversial speakers bring to AU.
Well,
Jacob.
Thank you so much for being here. First, I'd just like to say, my last favorite video game so good.
Yeah, what are you playing on?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
But I also just want to say, I think you're doing a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you coming here, talking to us about it. I think there's been a lot of conversations about how KPU allocates money, this and that, and I think it really helps for all of us in this room to get that kind of overview. I just was hoping you could touch on a little bit. You talked about co-sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any chance you could just talk a little bit about, I don't know how much of how tight-lipped you have to be about that, but how do you decide when you're going to co-sponsor an event? What's like the criteria? Has it fit into like your high, medium, low sort of?
Definitely. Trevor, do you mind going back to that flow chart that I have, please? It's like the second or like third or fourth slide. Yeah, right here. So to answer your question, under my outreach team, I have the deputy director of outreach and then our campus outreach coordinator. So actually our campus outreach coordinator is Maddie Dalton, who's sitting there in the back. And then our deputy director of outreach, Shauna, if you've seen in the packet. Yeah, so like we have like people on the team dedicated to making sure that like we are engaging with campus, like student organizations, and trying to get a sense of like who are the people they want to bring, and what it would mean to like co-sponsor a KPU event. So I'll give you like a few examples of that. So like with Loretta Lynch, I think we had 5 or 6 student organizations co-sponsor the event, and for us it was basically like we were planning that event ourselves, and we wanted other organizations to benefit from the fact that like this person was coming to campus and is relevant to the information, relevant to the work that they're doing as a student organization. So I had my campus outreach people, Maddie and Shauna, basically like draft up like, hey, like we want to invite these student organizations to co-sponsor. And then like we invited them, they all said yes. Co-sponsorships can look different ways. Like for that one, for example, we didn't ask for anything from them except to just like advertise and show up. In return, it's like we put their logo on everything. We like include them in the marketing, whatever. They get access to the post-event reception where they have the chance to like meet one-on-one with like Loretta Lynch, right? Some co-sponsorships are different. Something, if you remember from my confirmation hearing last year, I talked about creating a fund for student organizations to come to KPU with their ideas and be like, hey, we want to bring this person, but we don't have the financial resources and the knowledge of how to do it. Can you do it for us? A really good example of like how we're doing those types of co-sponsorships is the Harrison Brown event we're putting on with AU Pride next week now. That was a situation where it's like they approached us and we're like, hey, like we like don't have money for this. Can you do it? And we were like, yeah, I talked to my team and we were like, yeah, we really like this event. It really comes down to like the content of like what value is like what value are the members of these organizations going to get like from this event. And to us, it's really important that like we're using our resources and like power and connections on campus to lift up like their stature on campus as well. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much.
Cool. I'm going to cut off questions unless there's like any major objections so we can keep moving on. Because you know how to reach, you do know how to reach out to Yaz.
Yeah.
One question, Curtis?
I moved to extend questions time.
Oh, there is no.
Or I'd like to follow up on my previous questions.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So yes, I like to see myself as a problem solver on this campus. And when I see that YAF brings a controversial speaker like Dinesh D'Souza to this campus, I ask why would they bring such a controversial speaker to this campus? And my clear answer is that, there has been a clear lack of conservative speakers for, the minority population of our campus, which is absolutely clear. For example, the only conservative event I've been to that was sponsored by KPU was Attorney General John Ashcroft, which I'm pretty sure, no, you didn't attend that. Well, I attended that event, and you also, Shaheen put on the Carly Arena event last school year. I see this year that KPU has not accounted for the minority, clear minority of students on this campus, but that minority is most likely 10 to 20% according to my general guess. So how will you, as director of KPU, remedy that kind of lack of conservative or Republican speakers come into aid?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm gonna do is kind of push back on the first idea of like YAF and y'all bringing these speakers just because like there haven't been conservative speakers on campus. That's a totally like not good myth to like spread around, right? But let's be very clear about why YAF and y'all brought these speakers to campus. It's because they're assholes. And they are, I'm being 100% honest here. And it's because like they see the value in causing controversy and pissing off liberals. It's not because they don't see conservative speakers on campus. AUCRs brings a boatload of conservative speakers as well that are really great. And we have had, I think, 4, all those smaller conservative speakers so far, like within KPU as well. Like just the other day, we had, like this past Wednesday, we had 2 with our Hill event as well. And I think what's like important to note there is it's really important to understand the intent of like why those people are like bringing those events so that we can combat it directly, And I've had really good conversations with a lot of like the conservative population on campus. I work very closely with Rob Wines, like the president of AUCRs, and how we can work on this together. And him and I are in constant conversation. You can ask Tom, we literally talk about this all the time.
I love regular check.
Yes, we talk about this all the time. There really comes down to like, there are a few ways to answer like the issue of like us not bringing like super conservative speakers to campus. We haven't, like I said, the last Bender Republican that we brought was in 2012, if that gives you any indication. No, that's not true. 2014, if that gives you any indication. The problem is when we bring these really high name Republicans to come speak at AU, the ones that are like Bender material, or have, or like are really like high level, they are almost always like the really high controversial events, or no one shows up because the majority of this population is not like conservative, and they're sometimes not really like favorable of hearing other opinions, which is unfortunate. For example, when we had Wonk of the Year, Laura Bush, say what you want about that event, was like the only conservative Wonk that we had. The attendance was so low. And when it goes back to like that equation of like price time spending per student, is it worth it or is it not worth it? That's always been a challenge for us. And even with our low level, like conservative events as well. Again, like my goal is always to be at or below like the student activities fee. Some of like the conservative speakers that we brought that like we've paid for, because again of like that low attendance issue, have been like not worth that on the price level. With that being said, I am always looking for like ways to bring conservative speakers on campus. It's a matter of doing it correctly and doing it in a way that like is representative of what like conservatives on this campus want, which is why I work with AUCRs and other groups like that on campus.
Right, and I really look forward to working with you both as in the capacity as a senator for the campus at large. You know, I'm looking at how we can help the students, you know, like I don't want to see, you know, stuff like Dinesh D'Souza, the after effects happen in the future, because that's just detrimental to this campus. It furthers the political divide. And I think, you know, out of all these senators, I've probably attended the most KPU events from Parkland or wherever.
Is this a question, Curtis?
Sarah's right. And I'm just looking forward to getting to work with you. And I hope that we can, you know, as a Senate, as director, we can work together in the future.
Jacob?
Thank you. Really simple. Just one of the concerns people have is like money goes to KPU. They can't access the events because of the venue space because it sells out really quickly around the tickets. How do you decide like what venue you're going to pick? Is there some kind of equation that you use that's like proprietary that basically says this will reach this amount of students, and are you looking to any kind of like future revenues?
Yeah. One, I'm going to challenge that like myth real quick. In the past 3 years since I've been here, we've only had 2 events that have actually sold out capacity wise. It was Malala and then Elizabeth Warren, who came my freshman year. So I think like that's really applicable to our big events like Wonk of the Year. But like, for example, Loretta Lynch and the Parkland students did not sell out. And we're not at capacity. As well as like none of our smaller events over the past couple of years have been either. With that being said, I definitely like am always trying to like make sure that like we can fit as many students as possible, right? Excuse me. It comes like we decide venue based off of like our anticipated like number of students that can attend. And we're always like increasing or decreasing the amount of numbers, right? Like that's part of the reason, like if you saw with the Parkland students, like we did them in waves of like, you get this event, like you can get tickets on this day, this day, this day. And so that like we're tracking at what rate are people getting tickets the first couple of days, and then we can adjust our seat numbers appropriately later on. Sometimes that's just absolutely impossible. Like there is no space on this campus that can hold every single student within it. So when it comes to events like Wonk of the Year, like we just kind of like have to hit that capacity, unfortunately. But we like, even with Wonk of the Year, we originally had 1,800 seats allocated for that. And when so many people wanted to attend, we literally changed the entire logistics of the event and opened up another 700 seats so that we can get to that over 2,000 number that we had hoped for. And those sold out instantly as well when we released those tickets. So like we're always being conscious of the fact that like there are people who want to attend our events that can't. But again, it's not as prevalent of an issue as like it may sometimes seem like it. It's really only the big ones.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And can I get those packets back, please? Thank you.
All right, moving on to Secretary Bailey.
Hi, everyone. It's been a busy past few weeks with the e-board. I realize this is the first time I'm presenting officially in front of the new Senate, not clerking up here, which was fun. So I thought I would just briefly go over duties and responsibilities like I did for the last Senate, and then go into some more updates. So how to secretary. My position, it encompasses a lot, and it spans a lot of different departments. But if you go to the next slide, you can see it's communication, daily operations, and recruitment. So overseeing our social media, as well as maintaining technology and our website operations. So everything from emails to making sure that the website is up to date, as well as coordinating our recruitment efforts. So tabling on the quad, making sure we have staff there, and making sure that we have materials that make us look good to the students and the AU community. So some communications updates. So great news. We have times available for all of you and the rest of student government to take your official headshots to be updated on the website. We have some preliminary dates that are confirmed. So these are confirmed, but we're looking at some more if people's schedules don't fit or align with these. So mark your calendars for December 1st and 2nd. We have 3 hours blocked off for each day. I'll be sending everyone an email here to sign up for your 5-minute time slot. It'll at the end of that process, we'll update it to the website, and everybody will have a uniform professional headshot that you can use for professional purposes as well as government purposes. I believe I talked about this last time I presented, but one thing that I've been collaborating with WI on, they've obviously been taking the lead on it, is their new online publication of sorts that they're looking to put into print as well. It's called Elbow Room. I would refer you to the website to learn more and see what great work they've been doing. And that's not a typo, that is the actual URL, elbowroom.space, I believe. So take a look at that. WI has been doing some awesome work, and that new publication is a way for them to share it with the larger AU community. Founders update, it's very much underway. We had a 90-minute meeting the other day where we discussed our communications plan, and that's going to continue after Thanksgiving, and then we're going to, I don't want to reveal anything, but we'll have something in the very, very near future. And the founders team is very on top of their stuff. They have a communications person as well as their director and assistant director, who are both very focused on communications and have communications background. So working with them is a treat. And I'm excited to roll out some founder stuff in the near future. And then also, I'm the student representative on the University Marketing Advisory Council, where we met a few times over the past week to discuss the survey that you all should have received in the summer about the next phase of the university's marketing strategy. Not to give anything away, but say goodbye to Wonk in its current form, pretty much. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but the university is, moving to a new generation and with a new message. Yes, and we went to the board of trustees meeting as well. So quad jobs, yes. So like I said, when I last presented, we are pretty much moved completely to the quad jobs community platform. I've heard some great things and some things that maybe need to be clearer next time or in the future when we advertise the platform. So I've heard some great success stories that people, are finding jobs with the community members, and the service is working great. On the flip side, I've heard that, there are too many emails, and the way to update your information is a little bit tricky. So we'll be looking at ways to hopefully fix that and make it clear what you're signing up for in terms of the amount of emails and the information you give. But overall, it's been a great service, and the Career Center who we partnered with we brought together some success stories, and they are going to be interviewing them and posting it to their YouTube page with, to advertise how students can get part-time jobs on campus. So, some operational updates. One thing that hasn't really been done by secretaries in the past is deactivating accounts from former members of student government. So even going back like 3 or 4 years, people still have active accounts, which isn't a huge deal, but if you're not in student government, you shouldn't have an account. So I've slowly begun to send notices to those accounts saying like in a week, like we'll be temporarily disabling this account, but it doesn't delete anything on the account. Like if they need something, they can totally let me know, and I can update that for them. But that's also an area where student activities said we should sort of make sure that's updated for whatever legal reasons. The student government directory, that is almost complete. We're just waiting on a few more things, but then I would say by the end of Thanksgiving break, that should be up and live on the website. So you can see like an active roster of who is in student government and their roles. Campus labs, student activities is looking at a new way to possibly make different student organizations like events available to people. So they've asked us to sort of look at this new program and see what we like and don't like, and see if it'll possibly be implemented in the future. So we've been toying around with that as well. Another project on the horizon is creating an SG-wide organizational chart. So people have a better understanding of the work that you all do and everyone else in student government does, and the chain of sort of command and who has power over what. Another thing that's been on my mind is transition materials. I was unfortunately not given any, so I've been working to just formalize procedures and make sure that things specific responsibilities are down in writing. So from year to year and semester to semester, people can pick off where people left off and not have a long transition period. So my Senator of the Week, which I try to have every week, this is the second one, Bobby Zitzman. I not only give this to Bobby for his good questioning skills and inquisitiveness, but when I asked all of you senators to send in your bios and information, Bobby was not only one of the first, but he was pretty much the only one who fulfilled the requirement of question number 4, which was basically to get me in a good mood, and he attached a really good video as well. So that sounded weird, but it was like a music video. Okay, anyway, I think that's all I have.
Questions for the secretary, Curtis.
How much does the Secretary's office have for AUSG shirts? For example, I believe anyone in AUSG should be able to have a shirt like you or any of the e-board members, just so that people know when I go to events, when other senators go to events, that they know we are AUSG.
Yeah, thanks for the question. That's something that has really come up at the beginning of the year, because this is my 3rd year in student government, and I remember as a first and second year student, I would see some people with t-shirts and some who didn't get any. And last year specifically, I remember that I think it was like the 2nd or 3rd week of school, they were all gone. I'm proud to say that we have been intentional in the way that we've handed out shirts, and that I have set a rule in place where you have to be actively working outside of your official realm of responsibilities or duties. So that could mean tabling for All-American Weekend on the Quad, or doing things outside of the specific realm or duties to benefit AUSG as a whole. So, people have shirts. We're volunteering at Welcome Week, and I'm trying to think of more opportunities. But if the Senate would like to direct me to give shirts to certain people, I'd be willing to do that. We're not. Another thing to touch on T-shirts is we ordered a lot at the beginning of the year, anticipating that we'd be giving them out throughout the year, which is what we've kept to. So we purposefully haven't thrown them out to everyone, because at least my opinion is that some people will just never wear them and basically throw them out, and others will wear them all the time. So I want to give them to the people who are most dedicated and put in the most hours. So I feel like I can get this shirt. So break the rules. Huh?
To add on to that response, Stokepart did not get the budget they requested.
Oh,
So you're gonna cut
yes.
Stokepart's budget, you won't wear t-shirts, then keep that in mind. for the next budget.
Right. Yeah. My department budget was cut in half from last year as well.
Tom.
Yes.
Tom.
Okay, sorry. Looks like there was a question over there. Anyway, my question for the secretary
Yes.
is, since you run AUSG's
Mhm.
operations, especially social media, have you been tracking engagement statistics? Are we getting more likes over time? How does that translate to attendance for whatever we're promoting, for example?
Yeah, I'm not really tracking specific social media trends, but that's something I do have access to. One thing that I am looking at more directly is email engagement, and on average that is higher. The amount of people who open emails is higher, and I think that's because this year I've utilized the maybe you've noticed the function where you can put in the name of the you should see your name and the subject of the email. Those get at least 10% more people open them each time when that's used. So I'm going to use it more, but obviously not in every single email, because then it won't have the same effect. So thanks for the question. And there's always more work to do to increase student awareness about stuff.
Tom.
Follow up on that, is there anything that in working with the Senate you could foresee us needing to do to help you track statistics better or communicate better?
One thing that comes to mind is over the past, was it 2 weeks ago, our e-board went to the DMV sort of SG summit of sorts. As we also met with representatives of Tulane University Student Government this morning. And through those discussions, I sort of saw how we all experience the same issues and difficulties. And one of the things I liked was just the amount of hard work that I see you all doing and they do as well. But one thing that comes to mind is they table regularly and for random things. So I think just being present, and this is something we can all work on, is being present in spaces where students are, is something that I think the Senate and the e-board and programming orgs can collaborate on. Because if students see a face to these things, then they'll show up and they'll like our things, and online and in person. So I think we can just work on being more visible, which is something that is a problem that we inherited and we'll probably leave to. It's not something that we can cure, but we can try.
Curtis.
Hi, Secretary Bailey. I noticed that, compared to the class of 2021, that the class of 2022 is very engaged and active on this platform called Instagram. And I was wondering if AUSG has its own Instagram, because I know Sub and KPU, they both have their individual ones.
Yeah.
But would AUSG, the executive cabinet, be willing to create an AUSG Instagram?
Yes, we do have an Instagram, and we did use it a lot during Welcome Week, but it's our content has not been really pushing out as much as I would have liked to see. That's partially on me, because it's tough. What do I prioritize if we have 500 followers on Instagram, but 4,000 on Facebook? What do you prioritize? But that's definitely something we should work on in the future. I think our handle is AU Student Gov on Instagram. Give us a follow. But yeah, updating that more often is important. and using the AU 2022 hashtag. Good point.
Other questions for the secretary? Cool, thank you. All right, moving to President Fernandez.
Hi, everyone. I should email the presentation to you, Trevor.
Yep.
Alrighty, well, I just wanted to come and do like a formal introduction and presentation since I'm not acting as a speaker. While that was fun, I'm very happy to be with you as my official president capacity, which is a little more fun, in my opinion. So kind of just want to establish some goals for today. I can talk for hours about the work that my team has been doing and cabinet updates, but per the bylaws, I'm actually required to give you all like a state of the student government before the fall semester ends. So I just figured I'll hold it off until then, plan to do that possibly after break, and kind of just take some time to really flesh out what our relationship can look like, because I really want to make sure that we're intentional about relationship building, but collaborating and making the most out of any initiatives, whether they're related to advocacy or anything else that you're interested in a way that's not counterproductive and we're not working against each other, but with each other. With that said, who am I? I think it's really easy to view student government as this separate distance thing. And I think the role of the president specifically, like you're getting paid, you got elected, but like who am I as a person? So just a little about me. So I was born in Venezuela and grew up in Puerto Rico and Florida. I have a younger sister, she's 12 years old, love of my life, like my role model. And I came to AU just kind of like randomly. I learned about the idea of college during my junior year of high school. Came to DC once for a STEM conference that I was competing with at the national level, and just fell in love with like everything DC had to offer. Went back home and randomly was at a Barnes and Noble book and picked up Senator Elizabeth Warren's book. Didn't know who she was, didn't know the difference between a Democrat and a Republican. But literally just related so much to her family background, her idea of applying to college, financial aid issues, and I like finished the book and I was like, you know what? I like student government, I like leadership, I like talking, maybe I should be a political science major. So that's kind of how I ended up where I am right now. Prior to being student government president, I was the student trustee on the board of trustees, so I served on the board for 2 years. I can talk about the work that I did during my time as a trustee. Before that, I was an RA, I was an orientation leader, I've been a teaching assistant on campus. I was vice president of College Democrats, so I did some programming there as well. And that really sums it up. But just so you know, like I do more than SG, and that's my senior year, so I'm just looking forward to this, to the future. Like Yaz, also very data driven. You won't be able to tell that from this presentation because it's just an introduction, but I think it's important to quantify and be able to like measure impact. So if you're ever interested in like talking about anything wonky, I'm here for you as well. Also really quickly, so if you don't follow, if you can go back the AUSG president Twitter, go ahead and do that. And if I don't follow you back, just like shoot me a Facebook message. But honestly, that's like the only platform I have to like share explicitly things that I'm working on without having to go through Alex and like without sending emails to the student body. So it's probably the most you can gain like on a quick basis. So I'll just introduce a little bit about how my cabinet is set up. So first of all, I have the chief of staff. So that's Madison over there in the back. If you all haven't met her, you definitely will. She's incredible. But really my chief of staff works directly with the rest of my cabinet and myself in managing everyone's projects, providing the support that's needed, making sure they know who to go and when to go and how to initiate certain advocacy works. Additionally, she'll be mainly like the main liaison between my branch and you all. So she will attend all of the undergraduate Senate meetings. She'll attend CRP and then come in late for the Senate meetings because she's also in KPU, which meets at the same time. But just so you know, like she's here for you all. If there are ever specific projects that you all want to work on and want to collaborate with my team, Maddie is the point person. You're welcome to message me and we can find a time to meet, but really it just makes everything a lot easier if you go through Maddie. And if you want to CC me in that, that's cool too, but just so you know. Then I have my Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and that's Rafael Cicero. We've done a lot of cool work, and I'll talk about the updates, like I said, after break. But just to flag this for you all, so after break on the Thursday after break, we're collaborating with the Washington College of Law to host a think tank style workshop addressing classroom bias policies. So the way it's gonna work is we're gonna have undergraduate students and law school students in groups, and we're gonna be examining different policies that peer institutions have implemented to address campus concerns around classroom bias and things like that. And then following the event, we're actually going to gather what students came up with, what they liked, what they didn't like, and we're going to present a document to the Office of Campus Life with policy suggestions. So just to flag that for everyone, but Rafael, you will really get to know him. He's also working with the Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and ASAC to get training for you all around inclusion, both in terms of like race, religion, everything, but also disability, which is something that we don't really talk about, and maybe we should focus a little bit more on. Then Case, you heard all of the wonderful updates from Saram, but he's a part of my cabinet. And then academic excellence, this is Tia Jackson. So Tia Jackson, you won't probably hear a lot of presentations from her. I don't really ask her to, and I don't expect you all to. She's not a paid member of my cabinet, and she does incredible work as it is. But for example, the university budget forum that we had with the CFO and the interim provost, that was organized by Tia. She's currently working on some stuff around AUX and receiving student feedback. She serves on the AU Core Council. She also serves as a student representative in the Faculty Senate for undergraduate curriculum, is working on some stuff around financial aid. We're putting on some projects with the Merit Awards Office. It's just a lot, so know that that's coming. And then last but not least, we have the Community Service Coalition Chair. In the past, this position has been in the Vice President's cabinet, but this year it's in the President's cabinet because it's really aligned more with advocacy efforts and also our greater desire to partner with the DC community in really intentional ways. So stay tuned for projects. Some of the things we're partnering with Wilson High School to bring in their student government to meet our student government. I don't want to get into details of things that aren't confirmed, but we're looking into partnering with the Performing Arts Department actually to bring in a couple middle school students, in a school that AU actually adopted, LaSalle Bacchus, to bring them into theater performances and have them talk to our music students or theater students to learn more about their experiences and what it's like to be in college. Okay, so this past week, we had the Board of Trustees meeting to kind of just explain how it's set up. So on Thursday, all the committees meet, and then on Friday, it's the full board meeting. So on Thursday, as president, I sit on the Campus Life Committee, the Academic Affairs Committee, the Alumni and Development Committee, and that's it. And then the Comptroller sits on the Finance Committee, the Secretary sits on the Communications Committee, and then the Vice President sits on the Athletics Committee. You can see so usually the way it happens is the chairman of the board, Jack Cassell, will release a campus-wide memo with more details of what the conversations look like. But I also submit an official report to the Board of Trustees that is submitted probably about a month before the meeting. So these are the things I focused on in my report: equity and inclusion, civic engagement, budget year engagement, and programming and student engagement. I actually just tweeted out what I had submitted to the board on the AUSG President Twitter. So if you all follow it, you all can see exactly what the board read. And then when I present it to the board, what I do is provide more context. So, at the budget year engagement section, I had talked about the event that we put on. But rather, when I spoke to the board, I talked about the importance of college affordability and tuition discount rate and the concerns that we hear from upper class students when tuition continues to increase, but the gap is not met. So it's more of a conversation. And then the committee discussions on Thursday were pretty relaxed. And the Campus Life Committee, we talked about what it means to be a Generation Z student and what implications that makes for the future of AU. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? We also had a lot of casual conversations around stress culture on campus, food insecurity, academic, for alumni development. As you all know, AU is going to be launching a campaign to grow AU's endowment. So what do we need? How are we intentional about who our target audiences are to receive the most money that AU can to support students? And on Friday as well, we had a student breakfast with some trustees and some student leaders. I know a couple of you were there. I had nothing to do with the invitations at all. In the past, last year I did a student trustee. This year I'm not really sure how the process worked, but it was basically a roundtable breakfast. It was leaders beyond those in student government chatting with trustees about why they chose AU, what their favorite parts are, but also some challenges and areas for growth. And the trustees really value that, and they bring in that to the campus conversations in the board meetings. Sometimes they'll be talking about things and they'll be like, well, I heard this from a student this morning, which is really cool because it's not something you see with a lot of boards in higher education. So I want to talk about expectation and communication. No one ever talks about this, and then that's where all of the friction and tension starts to happen. So the first one is talk. I don't believe in I don't appreciate, honestly, I'm going to be very candid here. I don't appreciate learning that you have a problem or a concern with an advocacy initiative that I'm working on or something that's going on in my cabinet at a Senate meeting. I make myself pretty available. I'm there more in the office more often than I should be. Even if it's not my office hours, chances are I'm in the office. I just really appreciate conversations in a casual way. And anyone that knows me or anyone that has worked with me will tell you I am a highly critical person of myself and those around me. So if you see an area of concern or an area of improvement in the work that I'm doing, chances are I've seen it as well. So let's talk about it and let's work towards a solution together. I really don't talk shit behind people's back. I'm not here for this. Tell me to my face, because if it's a problem, we gotta fix it. We always CC. As I said, please just make sure you CC Maddie and everything. It just makes things a lot simpler for a lot of different reasons. We have our own e-board structure and how we communicate with each other, so please do so. I also just want to chat about personal space really quickly. So I think in this role, it's definitely been more challenging than I expected in how I take care of myself and how I prioritize being a student government president with other important aspects of my life and achieve that balance. So I'll just ask that as much as I'm here to be available and collaborate with you all, if it's a matter related to student government, please email me. If it's a matter to wanting to hang out and become friends, feel free to Facebook message me. Feel free to text me if you have my number. But I ask that you email first if it's a formal request, and if I don't respond within 48 hours, which is usually what I try to get back to. Sometimes I'm bad at it. If I don't respond within 48 hours, shoot me a Facebook message. Hey Val, sent you an email. You haven't responded. What's up? And then we can chat. But I'm just trying to be really thoughtful of that moving forward. The fourth thing is do your research. Believe it or not, historically, people like to talk, but people don't like to necessarily be thoughtful about what implications certain words has, both internally and externally, to help we present ourselves to the outside community. So I know Trevor is an incredible resource for you all, but as you start drafting bills, legislation, think about overseeing the executive branch, everything like that, I just ask that you do your research, know what you're talking about, you've talked to the right people, and I'll go a little bit into depth later when I chat about what I have learned the hard way on what works and what doesn't work. You can listen to me or you can ignore me. I'm just gonna share from my own personal experiences. If you're not working with the president's branch, don't use my name. Please don't do that. I respect the work that you all do, but if you're not working on a project with me, don't associate it with me. There's a certain caliber I hold my directors to, I hold my team to, I hold myself to. And it's not a personal thing, it's just let's be real about who's doing work here. If you're working on a project, I want you to have complete ownership of it, and I wouldn't try to take credit for something you did. So I wouldn't want you to be doing something and then try to pair it with me if we haven't been collaborating. I'm open to collaborating, but only if it's actually collaborating. Choose to be a part of the problem or be the solution. I've seen the undergraduate Senate. I was a senator my freshman year. I know how this works. Like, you all become friends. You all decide who you like, who you don't like. And then you work against each other. And I'm guilty of it too. Like, it's very easy to get caught up in it. But you all ran on such excellent platforms of transparency, of working together, of making the Senate more efficient. So do it. Don't get caught up in it. And if you feel yourself getting caught up in it, that's cool, but just notice that it's happening. Breathe, take a pause, step back, and ask yourself why you actually ran. If you don't want to do it, that's fine, but just know that you're going to be a part of the problem if you continue to make the same mistakes that the people before you have also made. And lastly, just a piece of advice, be thoughtful in how you carry yourself in certain spaces. Be professional and mindful. When you walk into a room and say you're a member of student government, people don't say, oh, they're part of the undergraduate senate, they're part of KPU, they're part of CASE, whatever it is, you're a part of student government. So anything you post, anything you say about the work you're doing is a reflection of the entire student organization. So just be mindful. If you want student government to be perceived in a positive light, if you want students to know that student government cares about them, that starts with yourself as a person. So, lessons learned. I will kind of go through this briefly. So from my personal experience, I think it's very quickly to think of an idea and be like, this is a problem. I'm gonna go talk to to the vice president of campus life on how do we need to address this problem. And it's really, really great that you're ambitious and passionate about whatever problem you want to tackle, but I think we need to be more thoughtful in how we do that. So these are my 3 suggestions. Again, I'm not your boss. You can do whatever you want, but this is what works for me. So you think of something, think about who are your resources and points of contact. So you have a problem with, I don't know, like, what's a problem?
Facilities.
Mental health on campus. Like, who are you reaching out to? Are there other student leaders already working on the problem that you're interested in researching? Have you talked to the counseling center director? Have you talked to staff members? Have you talked to the director of student activities? Who is supporting you? How can you reach people most efficiently? Do you think sending an email to some high-level administrator is going to gain you the credibility than maybe working with Trevor first and working with me, or if it's related to programming, talking to Yaz, whatever it is? How can you be strategic and not making a fool of yourself, for lack of a better word, and like showing up to a meeting and being like, oh fuck, like I thought I did my research, but actually I didn't. And thinking of general timelines and being realistic that like all higher education institutions, it's not unique to AU, are highly bureaucratic institutions. And you don't want to make promises to the student body that are just never going to get done. So be realistic and set goals for yourself as well. By this date, I should have talked to Trevor about my idea. By this date, I should have talked to Valentina, been involved anyone in her cabinet. By this date, I should have this meeting scheduled with X administrator. So just a few thoughts. Next slide. So you can find this online, and this is extremely blurry. So, you can just find it online. If you Google American University organizational structure. But I think this gives you a good overview of, and I don't know if you guys had orientation already, or if you guys talked about this, of how the university operates and what falls under what. So there are a lot of issues that you all will be tackling this year. So whether it's mental health, financial aid, whatever it is, they all have like their own directors and then their own vice presidents that oversee that. Just, I think it's really complicated when, let's say you have an issue with housing and residence life and you go straight to Dr. All. Like, there are so many people under her that are working on that issue, and there's no reason to feel that you have to go to the highest level from the beginning. So just think through that and like be mindful of those dynamics. I would also really, really suggest that if you're reaching out to a staff member about meeting with them to learn more or about an initiative that you have, that you CC the director of student activities, Ayanna Wilson, in the email, as well as Trevor, because Ayanna Wilson, even with me as someone that served on the board and has worked with deans, the provost, trustees, has really been such an incredible mentor in making me a more effective advocate in a way that I think can really benefit everyone in this organization as well. And then the how. So you have this idea again, you've thought about your timeline, blah, blah, blah. This is what I would suggest. What's the background? Provide some context. What's the problem you're trying to tackle? What's your proposed solution? Who are the stakeholders you need to talk to, whether they're student organizations, maybe it's Burwell, maybe it's Dr. Ah, maybe it's the director of the counseling center, maybe it's, I don't know, whatever it is. And what are your ideal outcomes? So what would success and measurement of the implementation of the thing you want to work on look like? Next slide. But that's really it, sorry. Those are my lessons learned, and I hope they're helpful to you. Again, I will talk more about the work that we've been doing on our end. I just want to be mindful of the time that's been consumed already and the time that I will continue to take up in the future. Any questions?
Questions for the president? Tom? No? Yes?
Yes, actually, yeah. So another 2 questions for you, Valentina. Let me know if these questions will be better addressed after the presentation that you plan on giving that you spoke about. But first question would be, could you speak to your relationship with other members of the executive board and how executive cohesion has been going? And where's the part that Senate could step in and an oversight role to try to improve the problems? And then my other question for you would be about the finance roundtable on Tuesday. Thank you so much for putting that together. Could you speak a little bit more to how you became the point person on that, as opposed to if there was another person that perhaps should have been in charge of that, and what the backstory there is?
Okay, thank you for your questions. I'll start off with the second one. So the financial roundtable that happened last week, I recognize that I think what you're alluding to, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's a matter of SG transparency and finances, therefore should be under the responsibilities of the comptroller. To give you some context on how it works, so I've been following a lot of the social media posts specifically around the student activity fee increase and the responses students had. And I realized that while students were upset about the referendum, the larger problem was that it was really the first time that students were having a conversation about what the allocation process is, why SG gets more some years than others. And I thought the root of the problem is that a lot of students didn't know how the process worked, or a lot of us weren't listening to the concerns that students had. So during my one-on-one with Ayana, who's the director of student activities, I discussed this frustration, and we both decided together that a town hall or a round table that the executive board held jointly would be the best step moving forward to address those things. I presented it to the executive board during our e-board meeting, and I said, I think this is something that we need to do as an e-board. It's not necessarily me or the comptroller or the secretary, but rather all together. At that executive board meeting, the comptroller was not present. She had another responsibility. However, the entire team decided that it was the best thing to still move forward with. We decided on a date together. At the following e-board meeting, we continued to discuss it. I, at that point, decided that I would begin drafting content for it, simply because I was the one that came up with the idea. The comptroller was not present at that e-board meeting either. And then at the next e-board meeting, we all went through the presentation together, because at this point, the event was on Tuesday, we meet on Sundays. The secretary, the chief of staff, the vice president, and the comptroller saw the presentation with me. We ran it through. They made edits and suggestions, asked questions for clarification, and we all agreed that I would be presenting. So that's kind of the context behind that event. To your first question about e-board dynamics and what our relationship has looked like, I think as a whole it's been a positive really experience, and like I love the people I work with. I think like any organization, there's always room for improvement. I think being SG president has been a really transformative leadership role in the short amount of time that I've been in. I've learned a lot about my strengths and my weaknesses as a leader, and I've seen other people also realize the same thing. I think it's important to think about how this year is different than previous years. So historically, I think the executive board has had a lot more oversight on other branches of student government. So for example, the executive board used to approve every KPU speaker that was brought on. That is not something that is done this year because of the precedent set by last year. I think it's important to recognize that we had a complicated executive board last year that didn't set the perfect example for our incoming team coming in. You had an absent president the entire year that then decided to resign. You had a vice president that had to act as the vice president and the president. You had a comptroller that was suspended at one point. And then there was Chris. So that's, it's hard. I can tell you that we're trying to be more intentional in how we give feedback to each other during e-board meetings and how we support each other a little bit more. But I don't know specifically if that's answering your question. Yeah.
I think the question was more geared towards how can the Senate work to improve that relationship. Where is our oversight role coming in?
As far as improving our relationship, I think that's something the executive board needs to work on internally.
Right.
But as far as where you come in oversight, I think if you see that there's a problem, I think as an e-board, or at least for myself, I would appreciate being notified that there's some area of concern. We can address it at our e-board meeting. We can try to solve it internally through talking, by just being people. And if it's not addressed, I think it's your choice as a Senate for you to decide what to do. It's your role, and I won't tell you how to leave that.
Jacob?
Thanks for being here, Val. I want to say you're doing a fantastic job, in particular with some of the events that you're holding. Unfortunately, I had a class that I would love to have gone to on Tuesday. I just wanted to know, who is the Community Service Coalition chairperson? I just haven't heard from them. Love to know.
Yeah, Maddie, do you want to chat a little bit about her background a bit?
Yeah, so, her name is Emily Smith. She's a senior. So, the CSC chair has been, kind of been a long-winded process simply because it's the first year it's the president's cabinet, so kind of just finding footing, for like what their expectations are gonna be, what they should do. But finally found the right person for the job. Again, her name is Emily Smith. She does a lot of work with the Department of Physical Theater, as well as the School of Ed, so she's studied in both areas. She just came back from abroad last year. She was in Spain. Really awesome person. I can give you her contact if you'd like, but we're working on some projects around partnering with DCPS and furthering our relationship, as well as bringing some performances to DCPS students who are interested in arts. So that's something that we'll be kicking off, as well as some things in the works with Valentina and Kogod, and seeing how we can place the right people in the right conversations with the awesome partnerships that the university has. So if any of you are interested in projects of community service and how we can partner and be responsible advocates to DC at large, it's something we're really interested in doing. So.
Or service projects for the internal community as well. Yeah. But I think what I'm always hesitant about with this position is that it's always been jumping around. So like it was the vice president's cabinet and it was completely ignored. Now it's in the president's cabinet and we're trying to prioritize it a little bit more. But you know how things in student government are, like turnover is bad, transitions are bad. So I also keep it in mind that service with the city is important and it's needed, but mismanagement of service with the city actually harms communities a lot more. I don't want to start huge things that will never be followed up in years to come.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bobby?
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I read the report of yours to the Board of Trustees on Twitter. As you mentioned, you would, in your presentation, give more detail to them. But the last paragraph of the report was about the student activity fee. So I'm just wondering, first of all, if you went to and or have already developed it, like can you tell us what you would say to the Board of Trustees about that? And then second, just my own sense, so I recognize your prerogative as president to do your advocacy the way you see fit. I would just add my, just as an individual 2 cents, that student government probably shouldn't advocate for an increase in the fee given the results of the referendum.
Yeah, no, so to clarify, so board reports are submitted about a month and a half, a month and a half in advance of the board meeting. So when I submitted the board report, the student activity fee referendum was still happening. So it's more of an update, like this is going to be on the ballot and students are voting on this. It wasn't me being like, we need to increase this. It was very much like students are voting on this. It'll either pass or fail. So because the decision had already been made by students that they didn't want the student activity fee increase, to be honest, and because time is limited, I actually didn't talk with the board about the student activity fee increase at all. They all read the board report. No one asked questions about it. So I decided to spend my time talking about equity and inclusion, civic engagement, and budget year stuff instead.
Curtis?
President Fernandez, thank you for speaking to us. And I was just wondering, in regards to, your role as a student trustee and president, is that will tuition keep rising? Will it rise from this year to the next? Just because I always, look at the root of the problem, and the root of the problem in regards to the referendum that failed was, our high cost of, tuition and living here at American University. So I was wondering how the Board of Trustees is addressing, the same things you addressed during, your strategic plan update with President Burwell. How is the university trying to keep tuition at a stable level, but at the same time pay for everyone's education and then how, university operations?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Thank you. To be frank, like tuition is going to continue increasing. I think we need to realize the state of higher education and the state of American University as a whole. We're not immune to a lot of the awful things that happen in higher education as it relates to access and equity. At the same time, I think we also need to realize like where we are as an institution. So AU's endowment is incredibly small compared to a lot of our peer institutions. And we are mainly tuition driven in how we receive our revenue. So I believe the number is like 87% of our revenue comes from tuition, which means, so tuition is literally used to fund things like financial aid. So if tuition wouldn't increase 1 year, it would literally mean that like we will not be sufficiently operating and like there would have to be compromises made, even the amounts of financial aid that are allocated. Part of the solution to that is the university having an extremely successful campaign to grow AU's endowment and diversify our sources of revenue so that we're not as tuition reliant. However, that takes a really long time. And I think it would be unreasonable of us to expect that within the time that we have left here at AU. I can tell you that I also say, by the way, for those of you that don't know, I'm the undergraduate student in President Burwell's Strategic Planning Committee. This has been a main topic of conversation and something I've brought up several times. And without releasing too much on what's going to be in the plan, I do think it is going to be adequately addressed for the next 5 years of the institution. Part of what we're specifically asking for is a higher tuition discount rate. The discount rate is the percentage of the amount of the total budget that is allocated to the Office of Financial Aid. So if the tuition discount rate is higher, the Financial Aid Office has a larger pool of money to be able to give more scholarships and grants to students that are needy in aid. The other thing we're working to address is the gap for upper class students. So we understand that tuition is going to have to continue to increase in order to be functioning as a university. But what happens when you're a senior and you're paying $65,000 compared to when you were a freshman and you were paying $62,000? So what the university needs to look at is how do we fill that gap? And I can tell you again, I think the strategic plan, without releasing too much will address that. But only if the capital campaign is successful. So goes back to like, just like university larger structure, like President Burr was in charge of fundraising, the alumni office. If you all are interested in getting to the root of the problem and helping AU's endowment grow, I definitely encourage you all to partner with the Student Philanthropy Council that fundraises for AU.
Other questions for the president? Curtis?
And in the sake of time, just really brief, I always like to keep myself accountable and others. So what is, one goal that you promised during your candidacy as president? And what is that one goal that you accomplished?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
So, what are some of the goals you had during your candidacy? And, those goals and, the status of them now. What are goals you accomplished and what are some that are still in the works for the school?
So I actually, I don't have my platform memorized off the top of my head.
Can we hold off
But-
on that until the state of the AUSG address? Because remember what Val said, that she'll be giving like a 10 to 15 minute presentation on everything that the cabinet has done. That might be a better question for that meeting.
But to answer the question without really answering it yet, if I actually haven't taken my website down, like my platform from when I ran. So if you Google like Valentina Fernandez Bridging the Gap platform, it's gonna be a Medium link, and it shows you my platform. And then what I will do at the state of the student government, is basically just copy and paste everything and show a check mark and what has been done and what's still in the works.
Thank you so much because you've done so much as president and I really appreciate the president's strategic plan.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you have any other questions, check the website, my office hours, email, whatever, I'm here.
Thank you. All right, so a few updates. One, everyone should have access to the Senate office, and two, your email should be set up. If you don't have your email set up, then you're missing a lot of emails from me and from student government. So please reach out. Talk to me right after this meeting so I can address that. Because it's Thanksgiving break this upcoming week, there's no office hours, so no worries about that. I will be in and out of the office tomorrow because of a lot of different things, because I'm also leaving on Tuesday for break. So if you need to get in contact with me this week, you have my phone number, you have my email, you have everything that you need to contact me with. Feel free to reach out. I'm very responsive. I try to respond within 24 hours to emails and usually within a couple hours for text messages and Facebook messages. In terms of, I wanted to touch on a few things that Val was saying because I think a lot of this was really important. So I know we kind of mentioned it. I mentioned it during my speech a couple weeks ago when I was running for speaker, but also talked about it a little bit in orientation. When it comes to the policy that you're developing, in previous years, it's always been write a piece of legislation, pass it, and then it either drops off because someone doesn't follow through with it, or they take that piece of legislation and go to administration, and then the administration's like, this cannot be done, or I'm not going to do this because this isn't feasible. So then it just drops. And so then it makes student government and the undergraduate senate look very ineffective and not putting out and representing the students how we should. So as a reminder, things that should change this year, and I encourage you to, one, obviously first do some research on whatever ideas or initiatives or policies that you have. Figure out who are good points of contact, what is the actual issue, what are students saying, and lay out some goals/solutions to the problem. And then by having all that information, you can then either bring it to myself. I'm always open to talking about these ideas, bringing it to Ayana, who's the director of student activities, or also I gave you, everyone that attended orientation should have that university contact sheet that I developed with Dr. Ah. That is the person for who you should reach out to for your policy idea. So make sure that you have your research done before making those meetings. That way, when you go into that meeting for 15, 30 minutes, it is as productive as it can be. And then when you are able to, if something comes out of that meeting and then you can put it in legislation, great. If not, at least establishing that relationship and connection with that person, and you can have follow-up meetings and really develop the ideas that you want. Also, don't forget, I mean, you don't have to do projects on your own. Reach out to other senators, look at the senators in your committees. If it's a project within that umbrella, it's always better to have a couple senators because it's always good to have a couple eyes on things to develop those policy ideas. On the point of CCing, the contact list specifically tells you that if you are going to reach out to one of those department directors or deans or whatever, you always CC Dr. Ah, just so that she's in the loop. And I also make sure that you CC myself as well, just so that I know what you're up to and that I can support you in the best way possible. And just in case like someone doesn't like follow up with you after like a week, I can help like reach out to them as well. Be like, hey, this is something that's going on. This is the email that I've sent out. Can we like move this forward? So always, it does not hurt to add as many people as you want to an email, because if it doesn't pertain to someone, then they're just going to like not worry about it. But you'd rather have more people involved in an email chain or aware of what's going on than not enough. That way you have the support that you need. And that way it will further help you in your role as a senator. In terms of other updates in your emails over this week, you've gotten a decent amount of legislative orders as well. So that lays out your committees, the office hour policies, the committees and the office hour policies, and then my clerical policies, which were sent out like a week and a half ago or something. That's like 001 and 002. So make sure you read up on those. The guidebook I sent out to you is going to be a really helpful tool for you to understand your role as a senator as well. There isn't too much going on, obviously, this week. As you saw, there's no new business right now, which is perfectly fine. We don't always need legislation, but I really encourage you to like reach out to me, sit down, even outside my office hours. I can be as flexible as I can. Just to talk about, like, I can give you some tips, some suggestions, how to like which are good policy ideas, which ones may need some improvement, which ones should be done just internally rather than like as a piece of legislation. So really, like, again, yes, I'm here to like chair the meetings and make sure that debate is going well, but I'm also here to be that contact person and resource for you in your role. And so have a good break, or this isn't the good of the order yet, but I will say have a good break, but we'll have 2 more meetings after break on the 2nd and the 9th. One of those may just be like our Senate retreat where we'll do like the diversity, equity, inclusion training and like some team building, like get to know you kind of stuff. We may do that in place of a meeting, depending on what the business or the docket is like. So I encourage you to start developing those ideas and be ready for the spring, because as soon as we come back from from winter break, we're going to hit the ground running and we're going to be doing a lot for that whole semester because it'll be a full semester ahead of us. There's something else. Oh yeah, committees. All of those are outlined in that legislative order that I sent out. Chairs, please meet before the end of the semester to find a time to elect vice chairs, establish your goals, and really figure out like what you kind of want to work on as a committee. I think that's it. Questions for me, Bobby?
If I remember correctly, there was some kind of email about committee's meeting today. Is that the idea?
It was possible. I anticipated that the meeting was going to be a lot shorter than than what it ended up being. And there's only, I think, 14 or 15 of us here out of the 22. So I think we'll just save it for another time. Just that way you can find a time for everyone in the committee to meet in case there are people that are not here that want to run for vice chair or have other goals and things like that. So after this meeting, we're just going to disband. Jacob?
Thank Thanks, Trevor. I just wanted to know if it was possible, I'll say this to also everybody presented today, maybe you could collect some of the presentations that were done today. I don't know if any of the information was at all sort of like things that can't be shared, so I guess not keep you, but something like Val's presentation was fantastic. I think it's a great sort of like roadmap. If you'd be interested in collecting that or Val interested in sharing it, really perfect for us to have also.
Can I share out your presentation or no?
I can make a revised version for you to share.
Okay.
Yeah, I should take out some stuff.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that when I send out the speaker summary. I'll include all the presentations for people to look at. Other questions? Cool. All right. Let's double check. Go through the rest of things. Moving to new business. Any new business for the Senate? Seeing none, moving to old business. There is no old business, so we'll move to public comment. Any members of the public wishing to speak at this time? Seeing no public comment, we'll move to good of the order. Any executives for the good of the order? Seeing no executives for the good of the order, we will move to senators for the good of the order. Any senators? Curtis?
I just want to keep it brief since I do have to go to another meeting. First, when it comes to campus and student life, I'm working with Dr. Ah. I'd like to work with Val too as student trustee and president. I'd like to work on improving the campus and student life here at AU. When it comes to, during Secretary Bailey's report, when it comes to dropping the word want from our university as a whole, I asked myself, why do we drop the word want? I'd like to know that. That's for another discussion. And lastly, I'd like to ask the Senate, how many of you know AU's fight song by heart? Raise your hand. By the end of the year, I'd like this entire room to either know the fight song, or maybe we need to have a new fight song. I don't know, but we'll see. That's when it comes to campus and student life. Second, when it comes to referendum, it is inevitable that the student activity fee is going to increase. I will introduce a referendum for a student activity fee, a revised version. I will work with Dr. Ah. I'll work with the Vice President's office. I'll work with Valentina. I'll work with you. I'll work with the Senate. And most importantly, I will work with the student body when it comes to raising the student activity fee, or possibly just working within our means. Because like I said last time, when it comes to being frugal about how we spend our money, I'd like to be smart about how SG spends its money. And lastly, I will report to the Senate after Thanksgiving, after the dust settles. Have a happy Thanksgiving. I will get the job done on this campus. Promises I made on the campaign trail, I will keep those promises. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Curtis, what do you mean by new referendum for the student activity
So
fee?
when it comes to the referendum, I think, it's asking the students, can we raise it by $5? $5 per semester. Just a simple increase exponentially goes a long way. It makes more money for the club councils, and I'm involved with I'm not involved directly with club council, but I've spoken with Philip in there. I've spoken with, many of the high level people in AUCC. And what they have said is that the referendum would have passed had it not been for SG. And that makes me really upset.
Got it.
I want SG to help AUCC, to help Student Media Board, to be a positive impact on this campus. I'm a member of SG, I'm a member of RHA, etc. And I want SG to have a positive impact on this campus, rather than to hear someone tell me that SG was the reason why this referendum failed.
Got it.
We needed it to pass. So thanks.
Danya?
Just wanted to say happy Thanksgiving.
Bobby?
I will be very brief, and I will say, in the legislative order, anything doing with the student activity fee goes to the finance committee, so there will be order, that's all I'll say.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll also be very brief. I wanted to say, it is Thanksgiving, where everybody has a great Thanksgiving, and that wherever you travel to, even if you're just staying here, that your travels are safe and that you are also safe. I will say that something I'm incredibly grateful for is the reports that we had today. They were long, but they were very informative. And I think it's very telling of everybody's kind of leadership, that they would want to take the time out to really invest themselves in presenting to us and facing sometimes some tough questions, but really like having the answers there. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who presented today. It was long, but it was really, really helpful and really, really informative. I really appreciate that. So thank you.
Tom.
I have a lot of points. Okay, so my first one is, I think that first, I appreciate all the passion in this room. And I think I'm looking forward to all the things we have going forward. I think that the student activity fee referendum was necessary, and that's why I very publicly asserted that position. However, I think that after being the target of an attack from a member of AUCC on a public defamation campaign, I would say that your sources are a little biased, to say the least. Additional, and this is a position I feel very strongly about. In addition, I think that AUSG is a club, like we're all working on behalf of the student body. And so I think that the members within it, we have to recognize are also people, and even though the Senate oversees members of the executive board, we can also be friends with them. So I'd like to clarify that I was intentionally trying to give the executives tough questions. They were not in any way gotcha questions, and everybody I asked questions of are friends with outside of this room. It's a separation of personal and professional, and I would make that distinction to also say that we're more productive as a Senate if we build a close relationship with all of our members within the Senate, and also with other members out within the AUSG community. I had a third point. Oh, my third point is that there was some commentary, and I don't want it to seem like I'm picking on a particular senator who's a passion I really appreciate, but I don't think that Dinesh D'Souza was invited to campus because of the lack of conservative speakers on campus. And that's another position I feel strongly about that I want to put on the record, because that event was only attended by about 15 or 20 AU students, and most of the other 150 students who saw there were other students in the DC area. Similar organizations held an event earlier in the week that had an attendance of about 5 or 6 AU students. And as is a political conservative myself, I will say that Dinesh D'Souza in no way represents my beliefs, values, and they're not representative of the AU community, AU conservative community, which I also feel in a position to speak on behalf of. So I wanted to make that clear to all the fellow senators. Dinesh D'Souza is a racist criminal and does not represent conservatives. And on the last note, I hope you all have a great and happy Thanksgiving.
Sarah.
Well, following that up, just everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and thank you to everybody who attended. It was incredibly helpful today. Just a final plug, as you guys probably saw, I put out a Facebook group that my roommate is hosting a student teach-in for nonviolent action on human rights and immigration. She herself has been in a refugee situation and is bringing in a lot of great speakers. A lot of professors are backing this. Specifically, Peace, Global Security, and Conflict Resolution Program are backing it. Latinx, SIS Undergraduate, Council on Ethics, Peace, and Global Affairs. So it should be a really great event, guys. Make sure that you come out and tell your friends. Thank you so much.
Curtis.
Since Senator Kemah did say my source is biased, let me just tell the entire Senate this. I'm an unbiased senator.
Curtis, address your speech to me.
Yes, I am an unbiased senator who will work for the students of American University, and it includes the Council, it includes the student body. I engage with everyone from the regular students to administrators like Dr. O. I will engage the Senate with students and the administration, and I don't think that we should say that AUCC is a bias source, because they're just voicing their concerns. And when two members who attended President Fernandez's finance roundtable, they told me it was not a conversation, that it was something that that SG had a one-sided we're talking and you're listening. that was how they felt about it. And, you know, I am passionate, I am, you know, a nonpartisan and independent senator on this campus, and as a member of student government, we can all work together on this issue of the lack of funding for our clubs. And I'd like to have a conversation with Tom, with you, with everybody on this issue, and it's something that, you know, we shouldn't just name call, you know, oh, you know, so-and-so's fake news, AUCC is a biased source. That's not how I or any of the Senate or any member of student government should act. It's all about coming together. You know, we may have differences, but we all have the same goals in mind, and it's to make a better AU. So that's all I want to say, and have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Some final good of the orders. One, I am in the works of scheduling a meeting with Dr. Aw to give an update on the referendum and what the goals are for the Senate. So I'll keep you all informed about that. Obviously, it is my intention to provide the recommendation of the students to Dr. Aw, who oversees oversees anything dealing with campus life, so including the student activity fee, that like the students do not want that. And then 2, everyone have a good Thanksgiving, safe trip if you're leaving. Keep an eye out on like Facebook and your emails and things like that if you're staying on campus for like Thanksgiving events, because there are a couple different organizations that are hosting events. I think the RHA is doing a box lunch thing on Friday, so be sure to be aware of that if you're looking for food options. So if that is it, Max.
I'm just wondering, if there been any progress on
Oh, excellent question, Senator.
Yeah, so we're currently, so right now, I think it is only the one position one associate member position has been filled. I think our other position is, the other person has left their position. I know President Fernandez is in the works of interviews for her appointments. We're in contact finalizing a chair nomination. Hopefully that will be done by the end of the semester. But I'll keep you updated on that as well.
And to add on to that, I will be putting up, I have decided one of my associate members, I will be putting them up for confirmation, the Senate meeting after break. So we'll have one new additional member if they are approved by you all. I'm interviewing the second candidate that I'm considering after break as well. And on the whole J-board chair thing, like that's really my fault. Like I just was completely unavailable when Trevor and I chat about it. But okay,
Awesome. All right, everyone enjoy break. We are adjourned.